First of all, I'd like to open with prayer and dedication for this Lady Florida Bardic Circle. So if you will follow along with me in intention. Ancient Mother, Queen of land and lake and sky, heed our prayers from the heart. Grant us comfort in these troubling times. May peace and love abide in your realm. I'm dedicating this little bit of sacred art we will all be participating in today to a dear friend who passed from our company here in Palm Beach. He went by the name of Ancient Raven. Had a great impact in the brief months that we knew him. And also to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who passed away yesterday. May her memory be a blessing, and may we rise together in her honor. So, very briefly, before the camera's like all the way up here. Before we begin, I don't know if many of you have heard of Lady Florida before, but this is just my evolving thoughts since I have been in Moonpath CUUPs before, speaking about her and things like that, and I know that you have done rituals and workshops about her before. So to me, my spirituality, my view of the world is evolving in that I no longer consider or work with a universal or planetary Earth Mother. I've always thought that Gaia is nice and I love her, but she's far too big. And if you consider the world the Greeks knew, then they most likely did not mean Gaia as in literally the whole world. Nor would they have bickered with another Earth Mother from another culture in another land. The world to them was what they knew. And living here in Florida, unless we have a much broader perspective and we travel around a lot, this is our land. This is our perspective. This is the weather we live in. This is the plants and trees and animals that we know. This is the seasons that we know. So in my view, Lady Florida serves the same function as an Earth Mother. And in today's storytelling, we're going to focus on that. I'm going to begin with one tale, which I think is very apropos to the times. And then I'm going to open up the floor for other people to participate with their own tales. Now, they don't have to be spiritual, mythic tales of encounters and heroes. They can be, what's it called, just inspiring encounters of the supernatural kind we've had here in Florida before, of times that little quirks and coincidences have lined up perfectly for this or that, or even just funny tales of weird and crazy stuff that has happened to you here in the States. Either way, all of it works. All of it is important. So, without further ado, let me start my tale, Making of Peace. This tale, I imagine, happened sometime 6,000, during the 6,000s, when the lake Okeechobee hadn't yet quite formed. During that time, the sea levels were a little bit lower than they are today, so there was more Florida to go around, more land. But what was here, instead of the Great Everglades and all the swamps and marshlands, was pockets of little small indentations in the ground, because as you know, we're very flat, with small lakes and some rivers, basically watering holes, and most of the state was a great savanna. It focuses on what happens in the southern half of the state. It was a great drought after many, many years of war and pestilence, just general bad times, as most stories begin with bad times. And eventually the people were fed up. They were fed up with the endless slaughter, the bickering, the lack of food and water and shelter and safety. And they started to come together, the people of the mounds in the center, where eventually our great Lake Okeechobee would be born. And they started to talk about peace. But they realized that what was happening between the people was nothing more than a reflection of what was happening with the gods, with the great spirits of the land. The flooding that was happening, the encroaching sea, rising ever higher, dragged up by the moon, the great periods of dryness and fire on the land, then the torrential monsoons and storms that would descend every season. The world was out of balance, and there was something out of balance. In fact, their prayers to the Great Mother and to the moon and to the sun were no longer being answered. So the wise men and the wise women gathered and did ceremonies for days to figure out what was wrong. They journeyed, they listened to the oracles, and eventually they came to realize that the land itself, the Great Mother, was in hiding, had departed, and all that was left behind was strife. So they started to question and wonder who should go to bring back the Great Mother and the Great Peace. And at first, of course, the chiefs and the leaders of the group of the peoples volunteered. It was their duty to quest for peace. But the wise men said, no, you cannot go. We need you. If you go, who will lead us? Then the warriors, the brave people, came up and said, we fear nothing. We will quest for peace. But again, the wise men and the wise women were like, no. If you go, who will keep us safe? Who will stand shoulder to shoulder, shields raised, so that our people who cannot fight may be safe? We do not need war. We need peace. And so responsibility passed down. The chiefs, I'm sorry, the wise people themselves couldn't go. They needed to stay behind to guide the folk in prayer and ceremony, and they couldn't simply abandon those duties. The talking went on and on for many, many days. Nothing got resolved. Nobody could make a decision. Unbeknownst to them, a lonely youth who had no mother or father left alive in this world, who had no ties to this world, simply packed up their belongings and left. They were accompanied by a spirit emissary who had come to guide the people in the shape of an osprey, who would swoop up high up into the sky, scout the lands ahead, and then come down, perch on the youth's shoulder, and whisper where to go. First, they journeyed to the east, and there they made an offering to the east winds, asking for a swift dawn every morning and inspiration. Then they circled down to the south And there they prayed for the comfort of good weather and clear skies and passion to continue on their journey. They continued on to the west, where they prayed to their ancestors, now gone beyond this world. And they prayed there for guidance and for hope that they could continue into the next world. And then they circled to the north. And there, at the mouth of a cave, the only cave in the land, for that the land itself was not so high and not so deep, they prayed to the ancient ones. And they prayed to the trees and the animals, and they asked for permission to see the mystery, to see the Great Mother, and to convince her somehow to come back into the world and make peace again. A great host gathered around them. Many, many animals came to this prayer. Many birds came of all sorts. And so, as they gathered, the cave became a tunnel, and the youth knew they had to go deeper, that this was the entranceway, the path. This was the only way to reach the Great Mother. Deeper they went, into the dark cave where they could only be guided by the stone and their bare hands and their stumbling feet, because there was no longer light. Deeper, where the water splashed on the ground and pooled and rose to ankle height and then up to their knees and their chest, till they knew that to go further they had to take a great big gulp of air and plunge into the waters. And they did. They went into the waters, deep into that darkness where only their touch and the occasional echo broken through the water could guide their way. An echo of crying, of tears, of sobbing. They followed that until their breath could go no further, but they knew they were not there yet. And so the realization came to the youth. And they knew that they could go no further with their physical lungs, in their physical body. And they had to go in spirit alone. At long last, they reached an opening into the air, where the air glowed, where the soil itself glowed with crystals. And there, upon a throne made of limestone, was the lady, the Great Mother of the land. She seemed sad, but also surprised to see one of the people to have reached her, recognizing their sacrifice. And she asked, "Why are you here? Why have you given up everything you have just to come and see me? Why is it even worth it?" The youth spoke with the gifts that they had taken, received from the four corners: inspiration of the air, passion of fire, the hope of water, and the certainty of the land itself. The youth spoke so eloquently and so well that it dried the tears from the mother's face and convinced her at last to return to the land. But it wasn't so simple, the lady said. There was indeed a war between her and the moon. Great injuries had been done that could not simply be forgiven. The youth had to leave the cave and journey to the moon and ask the moon for peace before the lady could return. Because if this peace was struck between the gods, between the great spirits, then the peace would follow in the land. The youth agreed. What choice was there? So they went, rose up through the earth, into the sky, accompanied by a chorus of birds, their wings flapping, taking them higher and higher into the sky until at last they found the moon with its full face emerging from the clouds, rising out of the east. And the youth spoke to the moon and asked for peace, told them of the struggles and the misery of the people below. But the moon was cold and uncaring, and it had been so for many, many years. And it would not listen, and there would be no peace. It laughed and mocked the youth. It taunted them with their perceived idea of power, who had it and who didn't. But the youth did not back down. And the more they spoke, the louder the birds cried out for peace. Peace, they echoed. Peace, peace in this land, peace. There must be peace. They cried out louder and louder each time. And the moon grew angry, angrier and angrier because their words were not heeded. Their will was not done. And these mortals dared to stand against their will. It shone bright rays of cold and deathly light to strike the people, to strike the youth, and all that stood in his path. But when they struck, they found only spirit, only inspiration, passion, purpose, and hope, and instead melded them together through a strange and ancient magic that had not been seen on the land for many, many a year. The youth became the birds, and the birth became the youth. And now they were indeed one people, one single people. And their power was so great that it even darkened the face of the moon. Finally cowed, his light taken and hidden, the moon agreed to peace. And out of her cave, out of the land arose the mother, great ancient mother. And they embraced, as they had before, in a great cloud of beautiful, dazzling, flashing light. The people knew below that the great drought was broken, that the rains were returned, and this time in balance. And the rains did return. And over time, very soon, they carved out a hollow lake in the middle of the state, wide but shallow, and full of water until on the southern edge it began to spill over the land and bless all of the south with water running slowly and still and shimmering, restoring balance to the world. This is where my tale ends and where yours hopefully begins.
Thank you, Dayan. That was very
nice.
Thank you.
Very, very nice.
Does anyone want to hear the tale of the first hurricane?
Sure.
Okay. I didn't realize we could share something like this, so I'll just recite it best I can from memory, of course. We're good. No feedback or anything from back there? Okay. No, you're good. Okay, making sure. So this is a story from long ago, but not far away at all. It is a true story in the way that any myth story is true. True not just in the chronology of this world, but also of the world between worlds. It is a story from when Lady Florida was very young. Long ago, there was only the sea, and in the sea elementals of the water played and danced all the day, while their creatures landed with shells of limestone. And the limestone built and grew over the aeons until a new land was born, a peninsula formed within the sea. And the sea spirits were jealous because they wished to keep the place that had been their home, and they wanted to take it back from the earth. So they sent waves upon waves against the land, trying to drive it back into the water and claim what had been theirs. But they were not strong enough, for the land held out no matter how much they fought to reclaim it. So one day, the air elementals were passing by, and the sea elementals thought, together with the winds, we could form storms. Storms so powerful and so strong that the very ground itself would be ripped away. So together they formed the hurricane. Wind and water rising and spinning and spinning, and the storms came against the land. The trees were shaken, and the very ground at the edges of the water seemed like it would be surely wiped away. Yet the land spirits who had come to call this place home, they did not wish to lose their homes either. And so they gave certain trees powers to stand against the storm. To the palm, they gave special leaves which could bend and sway in even the strongest wind, but the tree would survive come what may. To the cypress, they gave strength and power in its roots, a tree so vast that no wind could snap it, roots so deep that no wave could topple it. And to the mangrove, they gave the greatest task of all. The mangrove spread its roots against the weak shoreline where the land was at its most vulnerable, and the mangrove declared that no wave, no storm would ever tear him from his duty, for he would guard the land against all. And so the days passed, days became weeks, weeks became months, months became years, and still the storms raged on until all were tired. For they could hardly even remember what they were fighting over anymore. The water spirits admired the trees for their strength and versatility, and the trees had learned to love the water that bathed them, and they saw no problem, come what may, with continuing in that task. So what was the need to fight? So they all gathered, and they came up with a truce that no more hurricane should go against the land. And for a time, all was well. But soon, in this hot place, drought came upon the land. Without the storms, there was not enough water to sustain those trees which had learned to live within the deep rains. And so, while the fire spirits were happy, the land itself was scorched and dying. So they all came together once again to meet and determine how best to keep all sides safe and happy. Then they came up with an agreement that the year should be split between the times of rain and the times of fire and dryness. To the summer, when the crops were willing to sleep and rest, for all crops of our Mother Earth must sleep and rest. They would be bathed in the rains of the storms. Those storms would come from the hurricane, and yet the hurricane would agree to cause as little damage as it may, while still bathing the land with as much water and moisture as it could. And the fire spirits could live and grow within the time of dryness during the winter, when the heats were not so intense, and yet the plant could grow and flourish in that time. And so a great dance of balance was struck between the seasons of the year in this place, that each should come and go, doing all the good they could in their season, while harming as little as they may. And that is the great dance of balance that greets us in every hurricane season. For we need the hurricanes, even if we wish not to be harmed by them, for they do bring goodness and great things to this land and the water that it needs, while also we wish to be safe.
Anyone else?
No.
I know we shared like really big stories, but don't be intimidated by that. I mean, I enjoy the little stories as much as anybody else. For example, I have a friend of mine from up here. She's no longer in the state. I think she's in Virginia by now. Had this wonderful story of a very scary trip she took into, it's in one of the national parks. I don't remember which one, but it's like much further up north, thinking north of Gainesville. And how she managed to land on this patch of forest that was extremely and acutely unwelcoming. So she had pitched her tent and everything, and she was just ready to go down for the night and then wake up and keep hiking. But the spirits there would not let her. There was like knocking and weird noises and even like growling at some point near the tent. So she says that she got out, she like woke up the fire pit a little more again. So I guess it was like a designated campsite. And just burned some herbs in her stash and just started praying to the spirits like, listen, I'm only gonna be here one night. It's just one night. I promise I will not leave trash behind. I will pick up everything in my path as I've been doing so far. I respect you, I honor you, but if you want me gone, let me know right now and I will get out. But if not, please let me have a nice rest. And apparently that was it. That was all that was needed. Everything got quiet again, and she had a peaceful night's sleep from that moment forward. And that was it.
All you need to do is ask.
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, I like to counter that with my own story. It's not a forest. We have a park up here called Kahili, which is very close to where I live right now. It actually used to be a quarry, a limestone quarry. So it's not necessarily like the first idea Florida had. And if any part of it was like left behind, it was raised and then regrown after time. But it's a very beautiful park. And it has a bunch of different lakes and ponds, which is where they dug the deepest, take out the limestone. But it's beautiful.
Nice.
And there is they preserved a tenth of it, 10% of it was preserved as a natural reserve, was allowed to get a second growth back, and it's very carefully maintained now. So when I first started, going there and working there as a pagan, It was all fine, but this one time, I just went to leave an offering at a crossroads, a three-way crossroads. You make a maybe guess for whom. And I put it down, I dressed it up because I really like to like decorate my ritual areas. I'm like a florist for my altars. And then like I started hearing this thing, this panting, like coming from like the south. And I don't know how, I mean, I know some anatomy, but I was like, that is roughly the volume size of a human lung. So whatever this is, it's about that size. And I was like, well, it could also be a boar, but there are really no boars in this area. It could be a pig or a dog that escaped, you know, and all I was going through, but it was getting closer. So I was like, nah, this is not happening here. So I recast my circle and I turned and faced it and I like raised my wand above my head and I was like, this is not for you. This offering is for a being greater than you. However, I will do the right thing. I will give you other offerings, but please do not interrupt this circle. It immediately fell silent, right? Immediately fell silent. And then, so I miscalculated because I didn't actually have any more offerings to give that day. I just put it all into the one thing and it was already dedicated to Hecate and I was like, okay. So I looked for my bag before I'm leaving and I'm like, oh shit, he's my French. Like, oh hell. Like, okay. If I walk out quick enough, but I'm like, I'm halfway in this place. I'm like a quarter mile away from the exit. So I was like, okay, let's just put out your words. Heck of the words. No words. It was like I was just walking naked through the woods. The mosquitoes biting absolutely everywhere. And like this constant like chattering, whispering, like, and I knew it was in my head because it wasn't like real, right? It wasn't like physical noise. It was just, and like, oh my God, it was just so much. So now it's my quest to go to that place and slowly, peacefully rehabilitate the area. You know, every time I go back, I bring offerings and I'm like, can we chat? What do you need? What can I help you with? What's going on?
That's good. That's nice.
Yeah, I'm paying for it now.
Yeah, I've had a lot of supernatural experiences at OP Healy.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Wow,
I think
nice.
someone else is saying something.
Yeah, so that was not a good time. Next time, and since then I've learned just to be more prepared for whatever. So always leave a little bit of your offering on the side for whatever. You know, the gods won't look at you sideways because you didn't give them the last apple. You know, just keep something.
Yeah, it's always good to share.
Yeah.
'Cause you never know.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right.
Okay.
Well, it's my time. I think this is
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.